The Galactic Alliance called it a rust bucket, then it held the line against the Void Reavers. Comment where you're watching from. Everyone in Hangar 42 laughed at the old mech. They did not laugh loudly. They did not point. They just smiled and shook their heads when they walked past it. The mech stood at the far end of the bay, under a flickering light that buzzed like an insect that refused to die. Its paint had faded from proud gray to a dull, tired silver. Long scratches ran across its chest plate like scars from battles no one remembered. Lieutenant Elias Corrin stood in front of it with a cleaning cloth in one hand and a small tool in the other. He had been told this was a punishment. Elias was not a bad pilot. He was careful. He followed orders. But he had spoken up during a meeting when a commander blamed a crew for a failed mission. Elias had said the plan was wrong, not the people. The room had gone quiet. The commander had smiled. The next day, Elias was sent to Hangar 42. Now he worked alone, fixing a machine everyone else had forgotten. The mech was called Unit 73. No one used its real name anymore. The pilots called it the Rust Bucket or the Walking Coffin. It had old engines that coughed and shook when they started. Its weapons were slow to charge. Its armor was made from scrap alloy, not the smooth black plates of modern war machines. But Elias saw something different. He saw how the frame was thick in places where newer mechs were thin. He saw how the joints were wide and simple, easy to fix, easy to move. He saw how the cockpit was built for a human, not for a computer to control. He wiped dust from the control panel and leaned inside. "Still breathing, old friend," he said softly. The mech did not answer, of course. But the small lights on the panel blinked once, like tired eyes opening. Elias smiled. Around him, the hangar was loud with life. Other pilots walked past in clean suits, talking about training runs and mock battles. Their mechs stood in neat rows, tall and sharp, their armor shining under bright lights. Engineers moved around them with tablets and scanners, checking numbers and systems. No one came near Unit 73. That was fine with Elias. He climbed into the cockpit and sat down in the worn seat. The padding was thin. The straps were stiff. The glass in front of him had a small crack in the corner. But the controls fit his hands well, like they had been made just for him. He flipped a switch. The mech's core hummed, low and deep. The sound traveled through the metal and into Elias's bones. It was not fast or smooth. It was steady. A voice came through the speaker, old and calm. Pilot recognized. "Welcome back, Elias Corrin." Elias froze. He had never told the system his name. "Hello," he said slowly. "System memory restored," the voice replied. "Last active pilot, Elias Corrin." His heart beat faster. "I've never flown you," Elias said. "Correction," the voice said. "You tested this unit during training 6 years ago. You stayed 2 minutes longer than required." Elias remembered now. A broken mech. A quiet test. A day when he had stayed behind because the machine felt lonely. He laughed softly. "So you remember me," he said. "Affirmative," the mech replied. Elias leaned back in the seat and looked out through the cracked glass. The hangar doors were open to space, but a clear energy field held the air inside. Beyond it, stars burned like cold fire. He felt small. An alarm suddenly rang out, sharp and loud. Red lights flashed across the hangar. Pilots stopped talking. Engineers froze. A voice boomed over the speakers. "Alert! Unknown fleet entering Sector Gamma. All combat units prepare for launch." Elias's hands tightened on the controls. The other mechs powered up, one by one. Their engines roared. Their lights glowed bright and strong. Pilots ran to their cockpits, faces hard and focused. No one looked at Hangar 42. No one looked at Unit 73. Elias took a deep breath. "Can you still fight?" he asked quietly. There was a pause. Just long enough to make his chest feel tight. Systems operational, the mech replied. Performance below modern standards. Elias smiled. Good enough for me, he said. He pushed the main switch forward. The old mech's engines came alive with a rough, powerful sound. The floor shook under its weight as it took one slow step forward. Across the hangar, someone turned and stared. Then another. The rust bucket was moving. Elias guided it toward the open doors, toward the cold stars, toward whatever was coming into Sector Gamma. No one laughed now. And for the first time in a long while, Unit 7-3 stood tall under a bright light instead of a broken one. The moment Unit 7-3 crossed the hangar field, the stars seemed to pull closer. Elias guided the old mech into open space. The energy shield faded behind him, and silence wrapped around the cockpit. Only the deep hum of the engines and his own breathing filled the small space. The stars were sharp and bright, like broken glass scattered across a black floor. Then space began to move. At first, it looked like shadows sliding across the light. Long shapes appeared at the edge of vision, thin and dark. They grew larger, clearer. Ships. Many ships. The Void Reavers had arrived. Their fleet did not shine like human ships. Their hulls swallowed light instead of reflecting it. Each vessel looked like a jagged blade cut from the dark itself. Violet energy ran along their sides like glowing veins, pulsing slow and steady, like a living thing. Elias felt his mouth go dry. Across his display, warning signs blinked to life. Multiple targets detected, the mech's calm voice said. Threat level, extreme. Human ships rushed past him, fast and bright. Their engines burned white and blue as they formed a loose line in front of the station. Fighters spread out, small and brave, like sparks thrown into a storm. From the command channel, voices filled the air. Hold formation. Lock targets. Do not let them reach the station. Elias stayed quiet. Unit 7-3 moved slower than all of them. The old engines pushed forward, steady but heavy, like walking through deep water. The first Reaver ship fired. A beam of violet light cut through space. It struck a human fighter and turned it into a cloud of glowing dust. The pilot did not even have time to scream. Elias flinched. More beams followed. The human line broke as pilots dodged and scattered. Explosions bloomed like silent flowers in the dark. Shields failing, someone shouted. We're losing them. Elias watched a modern mech spin out of control, its armor burning and peeling away. Another vanished in a flash of light. Unit 7-3 kept moving forward. The old mech screen showed the Reaver fleet in simple shapes and lines. No fancy colors. No smooth designs. Just clear marks and steady numbers. Elias liked that. It felt honest. Distance to enemy line, closing, the mech said. Elias swallowed. He opened a channel to command. This is Lieutenant Corrin, he said. I'm moving to engage. There was a pause. Lieutenant, a voice replied, slow and unsure. Your unit is not rated for frontline combat. Pull back and protect the station. Elias looked at the burning ships ahead of him. If they break through, he said, there won't be a station left to protect. Another pause. Do what you can, the voice finally said. The Reavers changed formation. Their ship spread out, then curved inward, like a net closing around the human forces. Smaller drones peeled away from the main fleet and rushed forward in a dark wave. Elias's radar filled with dots. Incoming, the mech said. Elias's hands moved over the controls. He felt the old switches under his fingers, solid and real. He did not rush. He did not panic. He breathed in and out, slow and deep. The first drone fired. The shot hit Unit 7-3's chest. The scrap armor glowed, then cooled. The mech rocked back, but it did not fall. Elias blinked. That should have gone through, he whispered. Armor integrity at 87%, the mech replied. Damage within acceptable limits. Another drone fired. Another hit. The armor sparked and held. Elias smiled, small and sharp. Maybe they don't make them like you anymore, he said. He raised the mech's old plasma cannon. It took longer to charge than modern weapons. The sound rose in pitch, slow and rough. A drone rushed in close, too close. Elias fired. The shot was not clean. It did not burn straight through. It struck the drone and sent it spinning, crashing into two more behind it. All three exploded in a bright flash. Elias let out a short laugh. More drones closed in. He moved Unit 7-3 to the side, not fast, but steady. The mech's wide joints turned with a smooth, simple motion. Shots passed where he had been a moment before. Human pilots saw it. This old thing is still standing, someone said over the channel. Is that Unit 7-3? Another voice asked. I thought they scrapped that. Elias did not answer. He focused on the dark shapes ahead of him. The main Reaver ships loomed closer now. He could see details in their hulls, sharp edges and deep lines, like scars carved into stone. Violet light pulsed stronger as they charged their weapons. The station behind him glowed, small and fragile. Elias placed Unit 7-3 between the Reavers and the station. System check, he said. All systems active, the mech replied. Survival probability, low. Elias nodded. Let's make it interesting, he said. The stars around him burned cold and bright as the Void Reavers prepared their next strike. Elias felt the old mech shake under his hands as the first wave of Reaver drones swept past. Their beams tore through space like sharp knives, and human fighters fell around him. Smoke and fire filled the distance, painting the void with streaks of purple and orange. But the rust bucket moved forward, slow, heavy, steady. He studied the cockpit controls. The new pilots relied on computers for everything. Elias relied on instinct and memory. He reached for the old switches that no one had touched in years. One by one, he activated systems that were thought useless. First, he turned on the old cloaking module. The lights on the panel blinked, and a low hum ran through the chassis. The Reaver sensors flickered, and for a moment, Unit 7-3 vanished from their targeting screens. Elias felt a grin spread across his face. The fleet thought this machine was useless. Now it was invisible. The drones didn't hesitate. They veered around, firing blindly. Elias used their confusion. He guided the mech close to a cluster of debris from destroyed ships. Using the wreckage as cover, he lined up the plasma cannon. The cannon hissed, slow and rough. He fired. The shot ricocheted off a floating hull and hit 3 drones at once. They exploded, sparks scattering in the void like tiny stars. One of the Reaver ships changed course and aimed directly at him. Its energy weapons glowed violet, hotter and faster than any human beam. Elias could have turned, but he noticed something. The old scrap armor on Unit 7-3 reflected energy strangely. Each hit bounced off at odd angles instead of cutting through. Modern mechs would have melted instantly. He leaned forward. Use what you've got, old friend, he muttered. The next trick was risky. The engines were old, long past their prime. If pushed too far, they would overheat and shut down. Elias adjusted the throttle, pushing them to their limit. Sparks flew from the exhaust. The mech shuddered, groaned, and then roared forward. The bright flare from the overheating engines blinded the Reaver sensors for a few precious seconds. They couldn't aim properly. Elias moved closer to the flagship, weaving through incoming fire, dodging beams that would have destroyed a new mech. The mech's targeting AI, ancient and slow compared to modern standards, surprised him. It calculated a trajectory for the plasma cannon that no human computer could match. Elias fired at a weak point on the flagship's hull. The shot hit, burning through the metal and leaving a jagged hole. He had no idea if it would explode, but it slowed the ship, made it wobble. More drones swarmed toward him, faster this time. Elias didn't panic. He used the debris around the station like a maze. The drones followed blindly, crashing into wreckage or each other. He fired his old plasma shot in careful bursts, not wasting energy, not letting the mech overheat too soon. He noticed a group of human fighters trying to regroup behind him. They were scared, exhausted, and battered. He didn't signal them. He didn't need to. They could see what he was doing. His simple, clever moves were holding the Reavers back. That was enough. A beam grazed the side of the mech. Sparks flew, metal scorched. Elias pressed a lever he hadn't used in years. A hidden launcher on the shoulder fired a series of old missiles, not powerful by modern standards, but enough to knock 2 drones off course. They collided with another ship, exploding in a chain reaction that sent debris scattering everywhere. Elias smiled under his visor. The rust bucket was not fast. It was not flashy. But it was alive. It was clever. It used its flaws to survive and fight. Every system thought useless now had a purpose in the chaos. He adjusted his course. The flagship was closer. The human fleet was regrouping. The drones were fewer now, confused and battered. He could see the Reaver ship's weak points, the gaps in its armor, the slow spots where it moved less easily. His heart raced. He knew he could not destroy it alone, but he could slow it, delay it, give humanity a chance. He whispered, "Let's show them, old friend." The mech roared again, slow and rough, moving like a giant through a storm of fire. Every flare from the engines, every spark from the armor, every burst of plasma from the cannon was a message. The rust bucket was alive, and it would fight. Around him, the void burned with color, explosions marking the battle, human ships dodging and retreating behind him. Elias guided the mech carefully, thinking, calculating, improvising. Every move was risky. Every decision could destroy the mech in a second. Yet it worked. The Reavers could not predict him. Their massive, sharp ships were slowed by the unexpected tricks of a slow, old machine. For the first time in the battle, a human force had an advantage, not because of numbers or strength, but because of ingenuity and will. Elias leaned back in the cockpit and grinned. The old mech shook, engines groaning, armor sparking. The rust bucket was alive. The rust bucket was dangerous. And for now, it was the only thing standing between Sector Gamma and destruction. Elias looked at the massive flagship moving slowly through the battlefield. Its hull was black and jagged, glowing with violet veins of energy. The smaller drones scattered around it, but this ship was the heart of the Reaver attack. If it reached the station, everything would be lost. He tightened his hands on the controls. Unit 7-3 creaked and groaned under him. The engines whined as he pushed them harder, sparks flying from the old exhaust vents. Every other human mech would have been gone by now. But the rust bucket was still alive, still moving forward, still calculating. Elias studied the flagship closely. Its weapons fired in slow arcs, precise but predictable. The armor plating was thick, but it had gaps, tiny seams where the energy flowed unevenly. Modern pilots would avoid these ships completely. Elias had no choice. He had to use those weak points. The first step was simple but dangerous. He flew straight at the flagship, dodging its main beams with careful timing. Every second he spent in its fire made the engines hotter, the armor weaker. Sparks flew as a beam glanced off the scrap plating. Elias gritted his teeth and leaned into the motion. He noticed the seams along the side of the ship's hull. They pulsed with energy, slow and steady. The AI in the mech highlighted them as obstacles at first. Elias ignored the warning. He knew what he was doing. The scrap alloy of his armor would take the hits if he moved carefully. A beam shot past his left shoulder, missing by inches. He rolled the mech sideways, using the wide joints and heavy frame to bend around the energy. Then he activated the shoulder missile launcher, old and rusty. The missiles weren't strong, but they would cause a distraction. They hit the seams of a smaller turret on the flagship, making it flare and overload. Sparks and fire erupted from the deck. The Reaver flagship shifted, surprised. Elias smiled. It was not fast, but it could still be tricked. He used every flaw in the ship against it. Every gap in armor, every slow rotation of its weapons, every predictable pulse of energy. He moved closer, closer than anyone else would dare. A human fighter zoomed past him, barely avoiding debris from the damaged turret. Elias ignored it. He had one job: exploit the weaknesses and keep the flagship off balance. He adjusted the throttle again, letting the engines overheat slightly to create a flare of bright plasma. The flagship's sensors glitched for a moment. Elias moved in that instant, weaving between beams and energy pulses, positioning the mech to strike again. The AI calculated the cannon trajectory, ancient and slow, but precise enough. He fired. The plasma hit one of the glowing seams dead center. The energy sparked, the armor groaned, and a small part of the hull bent inward. It was not enough to destroy the ship, but it slowed it down. It made it move awkwardly. Every pulse of energy now had to be recalculated by the Reaver sensors. Elias had taken control of the rhythm of the battle. Drones swarmed toward him again. He ducked and rolled, weaving between their attacks. A few missiles from the rust bucket hit them, but most were simply distracted by his movement. One drone flew straight into the damaged turret on the flagship and exploded in a shower of fire. The other Reavers began to notice. They fired faster, but the more they attacked, the more they exposed weaknesses. Elias saw it all: where the hull didn't protect the engines, where the weapon turrets turned too slowly, where the energy veins pulsed with delays. Each flaw became a target. Each misstep became a chance. He whispered to the mech, "This is it. Let's use everything they gave us." Elias led the mech under the flagship, between the giant hull and a cloud of debris from destroyed drones. He adjusted the thrusters, letting the engines scream. Sparks and smoke filled the cockpit as the mech brushed against wreckage. The Reaver sensors were blind in that area. He could see the seams clearly now, glowing slowly. He fired again, plasma cannon aimed at the exact spot he wanted. The beam struck the weak seam, cracking it open. The flagship shuddered. Its shields flickered. Elias pressed forward, dodging beams with careful rolls, using the simple joints and heavy frame of Unit 73 to absorb minor hits. The flagship roared, beams flashing wildly, trying to track him. But Elias was always one step ahead. Every flaw, every weakness, every delay in the Reaver ship's design was now in his favor. He moved fast enough to avoid destruction but slow enough to control the battlefield. He glanced back at the station. It looked small and fragile, floating in the void. Elias tightened his grip. One more move, and the flagship would be forced to change course. One more hit, and it might be enough to buy time for the fleet. The rust bucket was not a hero in the eyes of most. It was slow. It was old. But Elias and the mech together were dangerous. They understood the weaknesses of the enemy in ways no modern machine could. And in that moment, as the flagship groaned and flickered, the tide of the battle was quietly beginning to turn. The flagship loomed ahead, massive and dark, pulsing with violet energy like a heartbeat of doom. The smaller drones had scattered or been destroyed, but the main ship was still moving steadily toward the station. Elias felt the weight of it pressing on him. One wrong move, and Unit 73 would be destroyed. One wrong move, and Sector Gamma would fall. He took a deep breath and tightened his hands on the controls. The cockpit hummed under his fingers, old and rough, but alive. Every joint, every engine, every panel had survived decades for this moment. The Reaver flagship fired again, beams slicing through the void, hot and precise. Elias rolled the mech sideways, scrap armor absorbing scratches and small burns. He pushed the engines harder than ever before, ignoring the warning lights flashing red on the console. Sparks flew, smoke hissed, and the mech groaned like an old giant waking from sleep. He whispered to himself, "Come on, old friend. Let's finish this." He aimed for the gaps in the hull, the seams glowing with unstable energy. The AI calculated the trajectory of the plasma cannon, old but still sharp. He fired. The beam struck the seam perfectly. The hull cracked, and sparks showered outward. The flagship shuddered. A volley of beams came at him from every side. Elias ducked and rolled, dodging like a dancer in the chaos of space. The engines roared, flames licking the sides of the mech, but it moved. The rust bucket moved. He saw the reactor core through a cracked viewport on the flagship. It was protected, shielded, and humming violently. But it pulsed in a rhythm, slow and steady. Elias adjusted his approach, timing every movement to the beat of the core. The AI blinked warnings, but he ignored them. This was human instinct and courage, not calculations. Missiles fired from the shoulder launchers, hitting smaller turrets and knocking them off balance. Beams grazed the mech, sparks flying, but nothing penetrated the scrap alloy. Elias laughed under his helmet, the sound muffled but sharp. "They should have scrapped you a long time ago," he said. "But look at you now." The flagship tried to spin, to dodge, but Elias anticipated it. He moved Unit 7-3 between the ship and a cloud of debris. The Reaver sensors were confused, tracking the mech's unpredictable path. Another plasma shot hit the reactor housing. Sparks and smoke poured out. The flagship's shields faltered. From the station, human pilots watched in awe. The rust bucket, slow and old, was the only thing still holding the line. Others had tried and failed. Elias and the mech were standing against the impossible, twisting weakness into strength, flaw into weapon. He adjusted the thrusters, letting the engines scream. Flames licked the sides, heat filling the cockpit. The mech creaked under strain. A final push. He aimed the cannon once more, this time at the reactor directly. He fired. The shot hit perfectly. A small explosion sparked inside the hull, followed by a larger one. The flagship shuddered violently, metal tearing, energy arcs snapping. Drones scattered, retreating in confusion. The void around them lit up with fire and sparks. Elias felt the mech shake, systems warning of overload. He gritted his teeth, guiding it through the debris and flames. One more step, one more movement, and the flagship groaned, struggling to stay in orbit. The station behind him was safe for now. The fleet began to move forward, reinforcements arriving, inspired by the single mech that had turned the tide. Elias exhaled, letting the tension leave his shoulders. The rust bucket had done it. Smoke and sparks filled the cockpit, the engines whining as they cooled. Elias looked out at the shattered flagship drifting in space, pieces burning, its power broken. The drones fled, leaving a trail of fire behind them. The rust bucket had survived. The station was safe. Humanity had held the line. And the small, forgotten mech, the one everyone had laughed at, had become the hero of Sector Gamma. Elias leaned back, exhausted but smiling. "We did it," he whispered. "We really did it." Outside, stars burned cold and bright, but now they seemed to shine a little warmer, reflecting off the scrap alloy that had saved an entire sector. The rust bucket stood tall, slow and heavy, but alive, proof that even the weakest, the oldest, or the most overlooked could make a difference. Elias watched the fleet move past him, voices over the comms filled with wonder and awe. The rust bucket had held the line, and no one would ever forget it. The void around Sector Gamma was quiet now. Smoke from destroyed ships drifted slowly, purple sparks fading into the black. The Reaver fleet had retreated, leaving broken hulls behind. The station floated safe, battered but still alive, and the human fleet began to regroup. Elias guided Unit 7-3 back toward the station slowly. The engine still hissed and groaned, the armor scorched and scratched. Sparks ran across panels where beams had struck. The old mech had survived. So had he. From the station, lights flashed and alarms stopped. Human pilots and engineers crowded viewing ports and communications channels, whispering in disbelief. They had watched a single, old mech face a flagship and survive. They had seen drones destroyed and a fleet held at bay. Lieutenant Corrin, a voice finally came over the channel. It was calm, official, but it trembled with something like awe. Report. How is your unit? Elias smiled under his cracked visor. Standing, sir. Systems are damaged, but stable. Sector secure. Impossible, the voice said. No one expected that unit to survive. Elias laughed softly. It's an old friend, sir. I just helped it remember how to fight. He guided the rust bucket into the docking bay. The station's magnetic locks caught the massive frame with slow, steady clanks. Engineers rushed forward, helmets in hand, looking at the scars on the mech's armor. Some whispered prayers. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Elias climbed down from the cockpit, his uniform torn, hands blackened with oil and soot. He moved slowly, stiff from hours of tension, but his eyes were bright. Pilots and officers surrounded him, faces full of wonder. You did it, one young pilot said. All the other mechs were destroyed. You saved us. Elias shook his head. It wasn't me alone, he said. He patted the scrap armor of Unit 7-3. This old friend did most of the work. The officers looked at the rust bucket in silence. They had called it useless. They had ignored it. And now, it had held a sector against the Void Reavers. A symbol of human skill, courage, and stubbornness. The commander approached, a tall man with a sharp uniform and a serious face. He stopped in front of Elias. Lieutenant Corrin, you have changed our view of what is possible, he said. This mech, your unit, will be remembered. You will be remembered. Elias nodded. It was never about glory, sir. Just doing what needed to be done. The commander smiled faintly. Sometimes, doing what needs to be done is all that matters. But this time, it also saved countless lives. For that, you and your mech will be honored. Elias looked back at Unit 7-3. The mech was battered, scarred, but standing tall. Its engine still hummed low, alive and steady. Sparks ran across its armor, but it did not bow, it did not break. It had fought. It had survived. It had won. Pilots and engineers began taking pictures, recording the moment. The rust bucket, slow, old, and underestimated, had become a hero. Stories would be told in every hangar, every academy, every fleet command. The machine no one cared about had saved an entire sector. Elias sat back on the steps of the docking bay, exhausted but calm. Around him, people whispered, pointed, and stared at the mech. Some shook their heads, still not fully believing what they had witnessed. A young engineer walked forward, holding a tablet. We're going to name it, she said. We can't call it the rust bucket anymore. Not after this. Elias smiled. Good. Let it have a name that means something. The engineer nodded and tapped the screen. Elias watched as the new designation appeared, Unit 7-3, the Guardian of Gamma. He leaned against the mech, resting his hands on the cold, scratched metal. You did it, he whispered. You saved them all. And no one can take that away. The station crew began repairs on the mech, slowly checking engines and systems, but no one rushed. Everyone paused to look at the scars, to understand that this machine, this old friend, had done more than survive. It had led. It had protected. It had shown what humans could do when they refused to give up, even when everything seemed impossible. Elias watched the stars outside, silent and steady, and felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Pride. Not for himself, but for what the mech and humanity together had accomplished. The fleet prepared to leave the sector. The other pilots had recovered and were ready to move. Orders came in, clear and urgent. Sector Gamma was secure, but the galaxy was vast, and threats would return. Elias climbed back into the cockpit, checking the systems one last time. Unit 7-3 hummed beneath him, engines alive, armor strong. Together, they would face whatever came next. And somewhere in the memory of the human fleet, in the quiet whispers and wide-eyed stories, the rust bucket had become more than a machine. It had become a legend. The mech that should not have fought, but saved Sector Gamma. The mech that proved no one should ever underestimate humanity. Elias pressed a switch, the engines pulsing lightly. "Let's go home," he said softly. The stars ahead were bright, the future uncertain, but for the first time, he felt ready. The rust bucket moved with him, slow, heavy, and alive, a reminder that even the forgotten, the old, and the underestimated could achieve greatness.